Welcome to Computing Concepts in Practice. Yesterday, after the end of the video with our creating and naming VLANs, I gave some questions out, some sample CCNA questions that talks about VLANs. This is to enable you, the one that is watching, to have an idea of what type of questions to expect in your CCNA questions. But I did not give the answers. I just gave out the questions and I asked you to comment your answers below on the video. Okay, so today I'm going to discuss those questions that I added at the end of that video so that you can have an idea to see if your answers were right or wrong. Before we go into our today topic, which is Inter VLAN routing. Yesterday, after we created the networks at the VLANs, we added some networks on each of the VLANs, assigned some IP addresses, but we could not test to see how these computers could talk to one another. So today, after discussing these questions, I'll have to go with you so that we can now add a router and now configure what we call inter VLAN routing to enable those VLANs to interroute packets. So let's talk about the question. Question one that from that list was a switch has 48 ports and 4 VLANs. How many collusion and broadcast domain exist on the switch? Collusion being first and broadcast second. So A, is it four collusions and 48 broadcast? B, is it 48 collusions and 4 broadcast? C, is it 48 collusions and 1 broadcast? D, is it 1 collusion and 48 broadcast? Or is it E, 4 collusions or 1 broadcast? So as you could see, based on the question, you realize that every switch port has what? A collusion. It's a collusion domain because there's a possibility that there would be what? A collusion. So if the switch is 48 ports, so that means we're going to have 48 collusions. Now, the second aspect of the question is talking about, they said 4 VLANs. You have to understand that each VLAN has what? A network, a separate network, which will have what? A broadcast address. So for that matter, if there are 4 VLANs, that means 4 separate networks. And each of them is what? A separate broadcast domain. So the correct answer is what? B, which is 48 collusion domains and then 4 broadcast domains. Now, the second question was, which 2 characteristics describe the access layer of the hierarchical network design model? Okay, if we look at the hierarchical network design model, you would realize that under the access layer is just layer 2 switches that operate on that layer. So, and we know that based on the answer that they have given, they said layer 3 support, no, because remember, it's just layer 2 switches that are operating on the access layer. Then we have port security. Yes, we can do port security on layer 2 switches. Then we have C, redundant components. No. Then we have VLANs. Yes, also VLANs operate on the access layer as well, because that's what like we did yesterday. We created VLANs on those switches that we introduced. So we also have PoE, power over Ethernet. So basically they're saying which 2 characteristics describe the access layer of the hierarchical network. The, the core things that operate there is port security can be configured and VLANs configured. So these are the two responses. So based on the answers, that the explanation that they have given, they said the main purpose of the access layer is to provide direct connection to devices on the network and controlling which device are allowed to communicate over it. The access layer interfaces with end devices such as PCs, printers, and IP phones to provide access to the rest of the network. The access layer can include routers, switches, bridges, hubs, and wireless access points. Switch features in the access layer I think I'm missing some explanations, part of the explanations. I think if in my next video, I'll make sure that I bring the rest of the explanations that has been they're trying to explain here for you to have an idea. Okay, so next question was, it was a diagram, and they said that we have a host A can communicate with host B, but not host C or D. How can the network administrator solve this problem? This is a practical question, but observing it, remember that VLAN 2, PC, host A and host B are in VLAN 2. That means that they are on what? The same network, and they should be able to talk to one another. Also, host C and host D are also on the same network, which is under VLAN 3. They should also be able to what? Talk to one another. However, they cannot intercommunicate because we will need a router, and that is the purpose for our today's class actually. So the correct answer for this is going to be install a router and configure a route to route between the what? VLANs. That's VLAN 2 and 3. I also observed this one. We have interface VLAN 1, the IP address is 192.168, okay. Dot 17.253, and then the subnet max is 255.255.255.240. Okay. So based on the subnet max alone, so let's read the question first. Then the no shutdown exit, then IP default gateway is 192.168.17.1. Okay. Then line VTY is 015, password Cisco, login, exit. Okay. So a network administrator has configured a Catalyst 2950 switch for remote management. That's actually the purpose for which we have to configure an IP address on a VLAN. So note that into the console of the configuration commands that are shown in the exhibit. However, a telnet session cannot be successfully established from a remote host. What should be done to fix this problem? Okay, so just observe the IP addresses. So based on the subnet max, this tells us that this is the network is increasing by 16. Okay, so slash 24, 25, 26, 27. This is a slash 28 network. That tells us that IP address is, the network address is increasing by what? 16. So to have this one said that the default gateway is 192.168. Dot 17.1, that is not correct, for especially to match this specific subnet mask. So the correct thing to do is to find out what is the network address first. So to determine the network address, so you can actually go back starting from 1, increase the network by 16. Okay, then you can realize that that is a long way. However, then the default gateway the actual network address for this is 240. So it should be 192.168.17.240. That's the network address. So, but the IP address for the default gateway is the first usable address within that network, which is going to be 241. So looking at the answers that they have provided, they say change the first line of the interface. That is not what our focus should be. Changing the fifth line to IP default gateway of 192.168.17.241, and that should be your answer for that. So now that we have covered the questions, the sample CCNA questions for the VLANs, now let's look at our topic for today. Like if you followed the last video, you would see that I configured these VLANs. So today our goal is to add a router and configure what we call Inter VLAN routing. Also, we will also be introducing so we're going to configure Inter VLAN routing. We will also be introducing a trunk port. A trunk port is basically like a highway that allows all VLAN traffics to pass through. So in this case, let me just give you an idea of what a trunk box should look like. So this is like an electrical cable. So you see that coating, that big metal plate that allowed these particular wires to pass through it. This is how a trunk port should look. So taking the individual cables to be like your VLANs coming out from that particular trunk. Okay. So I'm going to have to connect my copper straight through cord from the switch. So I'm going to use port number 24, or maybe I'm going to use one of the gigabit Ethernet face ports. So I'm going to use gigabit Ethernet 01 as my trunk port. This because of the amount of traffic it might be dealing with. So it's good to have a higher bandwidth port carrying the traffic. So click on and also connect to the G00 interface of the router. So I'm going to go into the router and start the configuration of the Inter VLAN ports. So one of the most important things that we have to take a look at is, again, you have to click on the router and then click on the CLI. Then say no to this initial configuration thing and enable the switch. Then configure terminal. So let me increase the font so that you can be able to see the text properly. Let's see. Okay, so now it's better. Now you can all see how big the text are so that you can follow me with the configuration as well. So first we will have to go into the sub interface of G00. So we have to go into interface G0/0 dot, then the VLAN ID. That's how you go into the sub interface. So basically you can give it any number, but I like to use a VLAN ID so that it can go in line. So I just put .10. So this will go into like the sub interface for the particular VLAN I want to configure the IP address. So the first VLAN IP address is we have the 192.168. So IP address, so 192.168.1. So usually we give the first usable IP address as the default gateway address, as the router's address. So .1 space 255.255.255.0. Enter. Okay, remember, the reason why this does not allow us to do is for the latest versions of Cisco routers, you need to put in the encapsulation command. So before you type in the IP address into the sub interface, you have to type in the encapsulation command, encapsulation.1q. This is the protocol, I mean the 802.802.1 protocol that allows us to do sub interface IP addressing. 1q. Then 10 as the VLAN ID, okay, just to differentiate the port. So so continue with the IP addressing. So IP address, okay, now you see it accepted it. So now we go into the next sub interface, which is going to be for the second VLAN. So we're going to have to type in interface G0/0/0 then .20 for the VLAN 20. Okay. Okay. Then again 802.1q sub interface. Use the top arrow key to reverse the command. So this is a lot. It's going to save us time. And then again, just to change the IP address, the only thing we need to change here is going to be .2. Yep. 2.1. So the same again. So we're going to do the same thing for 30 for VLAN 30 and change the encapsulation command and change this to 30 and then the IP address to 3. And yep. And the last one, sub interface of the 40, that's the fourth one, and then enter, then up arrow key, then you type in the encapsulation command. Remember this is the encapsulation protocol or the 802.1 protocol that allows us to type in the IP addresses under a sub interface for VLAN configuration on the router. So this is going to be the last one for 40, and then IP address is going to be 4.1. Okay, now once this is done, now exit and now go into the G00 interface and now enable the port. So interface G0/0/0 and issue the no shutdown command. Now all your interfaces are up. So now the only other thing left is for us to configure a trunk port. Okay, so remember the trunk port is on which interface? Is on, we connected the cable from the router. Remember the trunk port is configured on the port of the switch that is connecting to the router. So that is, in this case, is going to be so enable show. Let's show the IP interface brief to see which port that we connected it to. So fast Ethernet more. Okay. Okay. As you can see, this port is up and up. That's the G0 into, so that's G01. That's the port we connected into. So we go into configuration mode, config T, then we go into the switch port, so which is going to be interface G01, and then we configure the trunk. So we have to type in switch port mode trunk. That's how you configure trunk. Switch port trunk. So if you want to know which kind of what kind of trunking configuration that you can do on a switch port, so after you type in the command, you can always use the question mark to display to you the other aspects that could have been done. So you see, interface trunk interface could be configured. We have also allowed, could be configured. Native VLAN trunking could also be configured, and then we have interface trunking. So switch port mode trunk, we've already configured that. So now let's go into the computers first and now configure the IP address of the router as the default gateway on them. So remember, to do that, you have to click on the PC, click on the configuration, the desktop first, then configuration, and then you'll be able to now add the default gateway address, which is going to be 192.168.1.1 for the first VLAN 10. Then you do the same for this particular one, desktop configuration. Then this one there, remember the default gateway address is that particular network respective gateway address. Okay, like the one that we configured on the router for that particular VLAN. So what I meant is, if you open the router here and observe, so I want to have both open. So switch, okay, so open up as well. So we're gonna see. So if you go up, you can see that under VLAN 10, 802.1q, under this, we configured what? The default gateway address as this. So that's what you put on the PC as the default address. So here in this case, so this management is VLAN 20. So that means that management respective gateway for the router will be 2.1. So 192.168.2.1. Then close out of that, do the same thing for HR. HR is the 3. So desktop configuration, and then again 192.168.3.1. Then again, last one, 192.168.4.1. And then let's try to ping their default gateways. So you click on the PC, go to command prompt and type ipconfig to see your IP address configuration. You've seen that the PC address is this 192.168.1.2, and your default gateway address, that is the one we configured under the sub interface of VLAN 10 as this. So let's try to ping the router and see if we can get access to it. So we type, remember, pinging is used like to verify connectivity on computer devices, so, or computer network devices. So ping 192.168.1.1, and now we're able to ping the router. So now, can we ping? So let's verify each of them if each of them could ping their respective gateways first. So ping 192.168.2.1. Yep, it's working as well. Now let's try the HR. So ping 192.168.3.1. It's working as well. Now the last one, ping 192.168.4.1. Okay, this is why. So we're going to check on the configuration. We're going to check on the configuration of the sub interface for number 4. So okay, we can see that. Okay, let's check the configuration. So this just came up. Hold on. So last time. Okay. So we checked to be sure. Let's check to be sure. So do show IP int brie. So okay, 192.168.4.1, correct? Up. Okay. Now the only other thing will be if actually we assign the switch port of this one into the right VLAN. That will be the only other issue. So F02. So let's check the switch. So let's see, exit, do show VLAN VR. This will bring us all the VLANs and what we connected each of them to. So we see that, oh, VLAN 40. Okay, so that means that this is supposed to be connected to port number 15. So let's check to be sure that this one is connected to port 15. So port 15, that's where it's supposed to be. So let's say once that is done, we can be once that is done, it should be fine. We're still waiting for this to turn green to see. Yep. And this is how we do even basic troubleshooting. So you realize that voice PC was not connected to the right port in which we assigned it to the VLAN. So that is why the first time it did not work. So I have to now check my VLAN configuration and see where each port were going. Then after that, then I realized that, okay, this voice VLAN was connected to port F02, which was the wrong port actually. So now that we plugged it on the right port, you see, it worked out. So I hope you've really learned a lot from this video on how to do what we call inter VLAN routing. If you have questions, please drop the questions in the comment section. I look forward to interacting with you. And then if you have any recommendations, suggestions on some specific CCNA questions or topics that you'll be interested in, please let me know and I will make the videos accordingly. If you like the video, please hit the like button and then share it with your friends. And also, finally, the last thing is to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching.